Hello, welcome to the ZX Spectrum. My name's Lizzie Hodgson.
And my name's Brandon Ralph.
And this week we're speaking to Katy Woodrow Hill. So welcome, Katy.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So to give you a brief overview of Katy, Katy Woodrow Hill is currently the head of brand at Depop. Prior to joining Depop last year, she was a partner at creative youth agency Liberty, where she took the company to new heights. Throughout her career, Katy has been at the forefront of social media and understanding young audiences, working with some of the largest, most recognizable brands in the world. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Katy.
What an intro.
It's always good to start off the interview and you feeling great.
Yes,
So kick us off. I know you've been at Depop for about a year. What is Depop for our audience that don't know? They're probably a bit more older skewing than those that would necessarily use Depop, so useful to know what it's about.
Great. So yeah, Depop is the mobile resale app where Gen Z go to buy, sell and discover fashion. So yeah, we are a mobile app. We call ourselves a community-powered ecosystem because we are very much driven by our community. Fashion that is kinder on the planet, kinder on people. It's a resale environment. So 80% of our inventory is secondhand. It's a place where young people, we have an overwhelmingly young audience, so majority Gen Z under 25 audience, and they are buying from each other, selling to each other, working out their style, discovering who they want to be as someone who loves fashion, changing their fashion mood every week. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a wonderful community and really vibrant. Really challenges us.
Yeah. So what attracted you to the brand to join?
I felt like it's one of the first brands, only brands that's been built in the time of Gen Z for Gen Z. So obviously lots of brands connect with Gen Z, and I'm not wildly a fan of that phrase, but the younger generation who are pushing boundaries and like challenging us all to be better people and to buy better, to consume better, make better, be better to each other. And I just felt like from my time at Liberty, I spent 4 years at Liberty. I met probably 5,000 young people in that time, and I was like, this feels like the first brand that has been built for young people and really by young people. It's whilst we're owned by we're a company and we have to make money, but actually it's the community that drives and powers the business. We literally don't succeed if our community doesn't succeed. So it felt like this place where I could bring my kind of love of social impact and creating a better future to a big audience. And we've got pushing 30 million users now. So it felt different. It felt of meaning beyond just the bottom line. So that was my kind of main motivation.
Well, and so we've got this rise of fast fashion at the moment. How does that kind of fit into the ethos of Depop? Because you're kind of like you're the opposite of it, aren't you? You're the curated, loved stuff.
Yeah.
How's that kind of like evolved in the last few years, do you think, as it culturally as well? There's the two different worlds of fashion.
Yeah, and what we see is Gen Z is overwhelmingly rejecting fast fashion. I mean, obviously there's a big cohort of young people who still buy it, love it, but there's a lot of people who are seeking something different and better. We say, buying better, something, slowing it down, not buying based on like very kind of short-term trends, and like trying to, I guess, rediscover their creative relationship with fashion. But I think there is something to be learned from fast fashion, right? About how people want to consume. They want it to be easy. They want it to be kind of accepted and normalized. And I guess that's a big part of what we're doing. How do we borrow from like the existing fashion world, but show people with those kind of ways of communicating or techniques for buying and selling? How do we borrow from from what is working in fast fashion, but actually apply that to a more socially impactful model where you are not bringing new into the world, you are creating a new version of new by taking what might be old to somebody else, or vintage, or dead stock, and actually breathing new life into it. And that's a massive part of our community's kind of ethos, is they want to breathe new life into something. They want to bring the stories of that item with them. They want to see the movement between a buyer and a seller and understand why someone bought something and then they're selling it on. And the kind of cultural richness of resale is such a massive part of our story. And our audience love it.
So on that kind of topic of community and everything like that, I think, what strikes me on Depop is just community is kind of second to none and synonymous. Do you think that, that community angle is maybe one of the reasons that Depop has been so successful?
Yeah, I think we originally were built on these pillars of community, creativity, and sustainability, and they all kind of interconnect. But we literally can't do anything without our audience. So our business model is it's well known, but we make a percentage of the sales that a seller makes. So we literally have this sort of phrase like, when you succeed, we succeed. So it's built into our business model, and that's really interesting to me, is that you can then, the better you make that community as sellers, as buyers, you've encouraged them to be nice to each other, it's better for our business. So it's like the community part of it is, it can't be separated from our business, which I think is really, really wonderful. And also, as many people who've worked with Gen Z or are Gen Z know that this audience is very vocal and will tell us exactly what's what and what they don't like, what they do like, what they expect from us. So again, not only in the business model is the community built up, but it's also like their kind of behaviors and their attitudes and what they expect from us and what they hold us to account for. So it kind of happens on many levels.
Because I think something that always comes to mind with the disconnect between a community and a kind of brand, rather ironically, is YouTube. I think YouTube as a company is quite disconnected in lots of ways from their creators. But it strikes me as maybe Depop is kind of the polar opposite of that. How many sort of, features on the platform and kind of the messaging have been kind of led by the community itself?
We've got such a strong kind of data model that sits underneath it, and we're listening always to our community. So I think, everything is about either what they've told us directly, how they feed back to us, how they behave, like their kind of broad attitudes off the platform. That definitely influences the brand and of course the product. So we're just constantly learning from our community as what you might call a user of our app, but also just as whole people, as people who engage in culture and are inspired by things. So it's all of the features, everything we do is fully powered by the community kind of feedback loops that we have, for sure.
So it strikes me as it's more than just a fashion outlet. It's more than a place where you can buy your clothes or swap your clothes, sell your clothes. And thinking about the generational aspect of it, how disruptive do you think that is to the wider fashion industry, and what can the industry learn from you, not just what you've learned from them, and how big a market can this go? Is this something that will grow as Gen Z become middle-aged, dare I say it?
I think so. I think it's just it's just a new way of engaging with each other and shopping and buying. And I think what we see is the thing that's really disruptive is the production model. So the sellers are built into the marketplace. They're sourcing garments, they're upcycling, they're reworking, like the kind of, and actually buyers and sellers are not different people. So you might buy in order to sell, you might sell in order to buy, you might upcycle, move on. Like that feels wholly different to having this like single only transactional relationship with a product, and only transactional relationship with a brand. And so that feels really different. And again, I think throughout my career, what I've seen is these behaviors are new norms. They're not, you're not suddenly just going to hit 25 and be like, right, I'm done with resale, I don't want to do it anymore. The resale category is, you know, predicted to grow hugely and actually outstrip fast fashion. I can't remember what the date is, but so yeah, I think the things that we see that which are disruptive are long-term shifts. It's the things like, yes, this connection to production and being a seller as well as a buyer. You know, you were saying about YouTube, kind of like the ability to own your own kind of creative enterprise. It feels a wholly kind of Gen Z experience, which is not, you know, again, you're not suddenly going to hit a certain age and stop wanting to be creative. And the other thing that we see, which is, I think, one of the most wonderful things about this audience, is they're way more fluid in how they identify. Their relationship with fashion is more fluid. They're much more experimentative. They're not so binary in, like, you know, 60% of Gen Z buy across gender categories, even at a gender level. But what that means is they're just trying different things and they're giving it a go, literally trying on for size, deciding if they like it, trying a new trend the next week, you know, trying a new style, identifying something slightly different, much more intersectional. And that to me is the biggest shift. And I just don't know how other businesses, other fashion businesses, can really keep up with that, with the current production model, which is very linear and also completely kind of takes from the planet. Like, I just don't think that's possible. Whereas on Depop, you can, there are so many different trends, different sellers making like micro trends, and they pop up, and then, you know, and a buyer will buy them. But again, it's not taking from the planet to keep up with that kind of pace of trends. It's actually adding into the ecosystem. And I feel like that is just fundamentally different, which is the most exciting thing for me, is that finally a generation that isn't just like rinsing the earth to get what they want.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and sorry.
It's all right, guys. Let you off.
I think that actually does, you know, what you said about the excitement. When looking at, you know, Gen Z and the stark difference, you know, I'm Gen X, so I missed that. You know, the Millennials are the ones below me, that came after me, and there is such a stark difference, I think, between the Millennials and Gen Z. I think I relate more to the Gen Zs than the Millennials, because I grew up in a time when we didn't have fast fashion. We had to, you know, we had to reinvent. I grew up in the 80s when it really was, you know, with you know, Molly Ringwald and you know, Pretty in Pink and everything like that, and all of these things, these, you know, experimenting and the mashup of different experiences through the 80s, where it really was so many different cultural experiences that happened. And what I think is really exciting about this generation is, as you said, the kind of like there's a values lens that goes on it. You know, there's a what the sustainability. It isn't just a fad for them. I mean, because clearly they're inheriting a planet that's in dire trouble. And I'm excited about what's going to happen. I am excited about when they hit middle age. I am excited about, because I think those changes are going to be so fundamental that the generations behind them will also have that as the norm, without it being a, you know, without, you know, they're not going to want to rebel and go, right, we're going to mess up the world again. They're not going to want to rebel against it. So I think it's tremendous, and I'm fascinated to see what happens. I'm fascinated to see how Gen Z evolves.
Yeah, same. And actually what they challenge, because of what we see a lot of as well, is that this generation is also really influencing their parents, like the Gen X parents. And actually, so there is that transition with Gen X, who are generally in power as well, right, at the moment, and then slightly older. So yeah, I think as this audience get much more power, voting power, you know, more consumption power, I think we've underestimated Gen Z at our peril. Not Depop specifically, of course, but you know, I just think loads of brands still just don't think they're relevant, but actually they've got huge spending power. And it's not just about sustainability, it's about, you know, the kind of, you know, fight for equity, and they are the most diverse generation. They are much more intersectional in their understanding about self and identity, much more open to difference, which I think is just this beautiful thing. I mean, obviously not everyone, but you know, at a kind of cultural level, it feels different. Yeah.
and that's going to have ripple effects for generations to come.
Yeah.
And you can feel what I like about it is how angry they're making older generations, which means to
Yeah.
me doing something right.
Yeah.
I think speaking from the Gen Z perspective, I think I think the rise in some ways of platforms like Depop, and in some ways, I think ironically I feel like Facebook was kind of like the millennials, more like social media, but more modern day social media is nowadays like TikTok and YouTube to an extent as well. I think bring this kind of new kind of thinking and how we see the world. I mean, I think I look at a service like Depop, for example, and you can get such exposure to tons of different fashion styles and things like that you maybe wouldn't. And even outside of, say, the Depop ecosystem, you can get exposure to that on Instagram and across other social medias, which, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I'm imagining back in your guys' day, it was a bit more magazines and on television and that sort of thing.
Just 17. Yeah.
But what role do you think, are you seeing, I know we've spoken about Gen Z, but are you starting to see that kind of trickle down as well? Is it kind of becoming, I know technically speaking, we maybe don't know too much data on young audiences and their buying powers just yet, but could you see kind of, is Depop in some ways designed, most brands sometimes like to start from youth and skew upwards, so is Depop kind of going the other way?
Yeah, I mean, we focus more on the mindset, really, and actually what makes, who is Depop for, what makes Depop interesting, and it is about, we're still actually trying to work through that at the moment, but yeah, people who do want something a little bit different, or they are trying to make their way for themselves, and they do want new opportunity, and we want to be a mainstream environment, circularity for all, really, it shouldn't feel exclusive or niche. It should feel like we serve and kind of support lots and lots of different communities. So yeah, we try and focus on what it feels like. So our mission is to create the world's most diverse, progressive home of fashion, and that should feel like home. It should feel safe, it should feel welcoming, it should feel like you can express yourself, explore, discover. And I think we're here for people who want to do that. And actually, I mean, yes, Gen Z is a massive part of that. We're starting to skew younger. There's lots and lots of younger people coming up as well, and people who want more diverse, progressive fashion, better for the planet, who might be 40. That's, the aesthetic is still quite Gen Z, but I would imagine as people discover, the value of buying secondhand and buying this wonderful aesthetic, it probably will shift across ages. It's sort of less obsessed about age and more obsessed about how it feels and what people want from their fashion consumption. So that's what we think.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of something that I've kind of thought about a lot over kind of the pandemic and everything like that, is that, in some ways kind of, I remember going to thrift stores and things like that, and in some ways Depop's kind of become the digital thrift store, and I think from some of my kind of casual googling online before we spoke to you today, I saw that Depop had explored opening some pop-up stores sort of in the real world.
Yeah.
I say that real world, it feels really odd now because we haven't really been in the real world for so long, but kind of, I'm always really interested because I think there's a common misconception that young audiences just want to do everything online and they want to do that and they kind of don't care so much about the real world. But, where kind of at Depop, what's kind of been the experience of where you see these worlds meet? And is there kind of, a room for more kind of, I don't know, digital, but kind of in-person thrift store?
For sure. I think we've actually got a bit of data to show this audience has this sort of bias for action, bias for experience. They want to experience things, and it's less about digital or real world, and it's about how you blend those together. so I heard this like terrible phrase like phygital or something like that, like what, but you know, it's true though. It's like digital is not this other world for this audience, and I think the quicker everyone else can work that out, it's just a different way of engaging at this time, where your phone is deeply connected to your real world experience because it's got camera on it, and you use filters, and you're, you know, using things like TikTok and Snapchat. Like, yeah, so I think our retail spaces also need to start to, you know, we have actually had spaces like we've got a space in LA, we used to have a space in London, New York, like we, you know, space was such an important part of our brand, and we are sort of trying to work out what the future of that might be. But I think whatever it becomes, it will have to be a space which isn't just about retail, it isn't just about buying, it isn't just about making and creativity, it's all of those things, because that's what Depop is. It's a social platform for some people, it's somewhere where people buy their clothes, it's somewhere where people make a living, it's where people get inspired and like meet someone they would never meet anywhere else. Like, and if we're going to have a real world space, it should do all of those things as well. Like, it would be weird if we just created this full like retail only environment which didn't have any of that inspiration. So yeah, we did a collab with Selfridges just before I started last year, I think it was, and yeah, there was like, it was curated by young people, and it was all of their fashion and their eye, and it was their opportunity to be in the retail environment. It wasn't just like us as a brand. So yeah, I think gone are the days. I personally think gone are the days where like the physical environment is just one thing, and actually what young people are after is an experience which will add to their lives, and that isn't just purchasing stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I think that I'm kind of excited to see what comes out in a sort of post-COVID world, when actually, rather interestingly, I think, you know, in the property market, the price of going into retail might be considerably lower.
yeah.
Because I feel like right now, you know, I look in sort of our industry and sort of, you know, film and TV world, like I feel like there isn't like these exciting kind of in-person experiences, particularly skewed at young audiences. You know, like I think, you know, we go to the cinema and watch a movie, but that's kind of it. There isn't, and I feel like there's kind of, from what I read about sort of Depop's kind of image in the stores, it felt like kind of that next evolution. And I think, in my opinion, maybe rather controversially, I think one of the only kind of brands that does retail particularly well is Apple. And I think that's because Apple's core focus is always like actually not on like people buying their products in their store, but it's about kind of the experience.
Yeah.
And I think kind of we're maybe moving towards a bit more of that experience driven retail.
Exactly. I think that's the way forward. Like, otherwise, there's enough retail spaces. Like, when I was at Liberty, actually, we ran, it just closed up as I was starting there, but we ran a space matching project, which was funded by the Big Lottery, basically using unused spaces and giving them over to young people for their creative projects, and it literally transformed people's lives. Like, we launched, I say we, like I worked on it, didn't work on it, but like, you know, it was called Somewhere To, and it literally launched like hundreds of thousands of careers, and it gave people space to be creative in a way that they weren't. And I just think we've lost that reality, is that young people need space. They need space away from the home, like their familial home, which might not always be great. They need space away from school, which is an institution. They need space to discover themselves and flourish. And I think so many of those spaces for young people have been lost and have become commercial. Like, so now you can go to the mall or whatever, you might maybe go to a youth club, but maybe not. Like, where is that space for young people? And I just think we have a responsibility. I would say it links us a massive issue with mental health, because there is no space where you're not buying and you're just being, and you can make mistakes and you can try and it's okay. And I think we the quicker we engage with that, the better for young people.
I was just about to say about the mental health. Again, you know, I am going to draw on my experience when I was growing up. We had the youth clubs. We had those spaces. We had the areas we could go to. It was, in a way, kind of like you'd look at what happened back then and go, that was so progressive. And it worked. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, mental health was not discussed when I was growing up. However, you did have those outlets, and you did have those areas, and going shopping, as it were, wasn't about consumerism, just about consumerism. It was about socializing, it was about seeing your friends, it was about growing up, it was about testing boundaries, it was all of those things in a safe environment.
Yeah.
You know, and you had to get on a bus, and you had, you know, I lived in the middle of the countryside, you had to get on a bus, you went to the city, you know, my city was Bristol, so I grew up in the West Country, and I grew up around all the time when trip hop was coming in, and Massive Attack and Portishead, and there was that kind of excitement of culture and music and space, and we all used to gather at the bottom of this place called Park Street in Bristol, and we'd all be there with our big, you know, our bum bags were back then, you know, our big bum bags, and it was that expression, and you look forward to it. And that's what concerns me about where are those spaces for young people, where are those safe places, because when young people gather now, they're often demonized, or they're seen as something threatening, or, you know, and having those spaces, like Brandon said, having the space where, you know, Apple's kind of nailed it, but you need those spaces, and if you can bring those different elements together, it would be a wonderful experience for young people. And we're humans, we need human connection. It's not just through the screen. We need that connection with each other, which is what's been so missing in the last year and a half.
Yeah, and what you've just described is why home of fashion is in our mission statement. I know mission statements can be a little bit like whatever, but we did a lot of work to work out what does that feeling feel like. It has to feel safe but exploratory. It has to feel inspiring, but also like somewhat within some boundaries. Like it has, we want young people to explore, but also be kind to each other. Like, I don't know, I just love that idea that a space can be kind of contradictory and it brings lots of different things together. And that's what we are trying to build. You know, it's not just transactional, it's not just social, it's a bit of both. And that fashion and resale fashion can be an anchor to that. It feels, yeah, that's the most exciting thing for me about our brand, is that we actually are those things for a lot of people. We just want to make that now for more people. So, yeah.
And experimenting is really crucial, and being allowed to experiment without fear of getting it wrong.
Yeah, or getting it wrong, experimenting. Yeah, exactly, like getting it wrong, and that's fine, and you sometimes mess up, and that's how you learn. I've got this like mantra with my kids at the moment of like, mistakes is how you learn, mummy, it's fine. I'm like, yes, you will be a coder one day. Yeah, I think like, especially millennials as well have been told that you can't make any mistakes, right? Can't make mistakes, perfection complex. Like I'm definitely yeah. And I just don't think that, I think there's so many things for this generation, Gen Z, to deal with, that we can't teach them that. You have to teach them resilience and how to find contradiction and deal with it. So
you can't lie to them. We can't say dream it is and it will happen. You know, that kind, all of that, which was the narrative that the millennials had, you know, believe in yourself, you know, dream it will happen, follow your, all of that they had no context to them. Yeah. So there was massive disappointment when these things didn't happen, whereas a bit of realism and, as you say, resilience and pathways out of failure. Because I'm at, you know, every one of us have failed catastrophically, I'm sure, in one way or another, but it's propelled us forward. I always say you fall forward, don't fall back, fall forward.
Love it. Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah, so to spin up the conversation, because I'm aware of the time we've got, I think kind of along these lines, one of the most exciting things that I think I've found with Gen Z is just how entrepreneurial they are, and how much they're driven to, I don't know, start their own YouTube channel, to start their own businesses, that sort of element of it. And one of my sort of favorite things about Depop is just kind of how entrepreneurial it has become. So I recently read about Isabella Verana and her 14,000 items that have been sold on the platform, which is kind of crazy in some ways. And I would say rivals definitely some retail stores, and probably a lot of online stores as well. She's kind of built a small sort of empire for herself. Sort of how important and what sort of role does this kind of ecosystem play in the platform? And was it something that was kind of envisioned from the start, or has it been something that's kind of just naturally occurred? I know there was kind of always the assumption that people would buy and sell stuff, but was it ever envisioned that people would have kind of whole businesses around selling and buying?
Yeah, like it was set up by our founder Simon. It's like an extent. He used to run this magazine called Pig Magazine, I think, and it was set up as like a place for that creative community to buy and sell between each other. I think there was always this intention of like this kind of cultural connection, but also making money and having opportunity. And I think what happened was the early adopters were the like really entrepreneurial, like I'm gonna make this work, I'm gonna give it a go. But in some ways that is a bit of a privilege as well, like the people, the privilege to have the space and time to really kind of build that entrepreneurialism. So we've moved a little bit away from that word, just because I think, like, I know loads of people who've got businesses, and like loads of people I've met at Liberty who like making a name for themselves would never call themselves an entrepreneur because it's just too much, or it doesn't connect with them. So like this kind of creative opportunity has always been a part of our community, and because it is to succeed, it's about giving it a go, making it work, and then quite quickly like building a brand and building a kind of aesthetic. That's actually quite a unique part of the Depop platform. Like, we have human curation, we prioritize kind of people showing people, peer-to-peer. The sellers that do really well have got their own style, they've got their own aesthetic, they've kind of branded their platform. So like that idea of like always kind of pushing and growing and developing is definitely a kind of part of the community, and one that we try and help flourish. We just want to make that available to everyone, even if the word entrepreneur doesn't resonate with them, or if they're like, I'm never going to be a top seller, but I do want to make some money to put myself through college, or I want to make some money to buy some new cute jeans. Like that, it doesn't matter where your spectrum is. Like we want to help anyone get to whatever their goal is, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, I read this kind of piece recently about kind of the modern take on kind of social and online and digital is curation, and kind of bringing things together. And that's kind of what a lot of what Gen Z is about. It's like, how can we create playlists on Spotify of our favorite songs? How can we create, kind of groups of posts, kind of on Instagram and meme pages and things like that. And I think in some ways kind of Depop embodies that curation in fashion. Has there been, in some ways, I will be honest, I'm not a huge buyer on Depop personally, but is there a lot more? I'm not a huge, as Lizzie knows, I'm not a huge fashion person anyway, am I, Lizzie?
Well, you're looking at his uniform right now.
I'm very kind
black
of like
t-shirt, white t-shirt, black jeans.
Steve Jobs vibe. I'd probably still wear the same outfit, Katy, from when we first met. But essentially, my question around it is like, is it becoming kind of, I know we've spoken about sort of secondhand and this kind of idea of thrifting. Are people coming in and customizing and creating new garments from that? Because, I think maybe one of the most exciting things is, and I apologize, you're probably hearing the dog in the background, but is there a kind of a rise of this new sort of curation element of it?
We have literally have a curation team at Depop who are this kind of like ultimate window into the kind of mood board of our platform. I definitely think we see that a lot. Mood boarding is a huge thing for this audience. They're kind of collecting and curating, like 100%. They use Depop to do that. They use like as a buyer, you might use your Depop likes to curate and kind of build lists of things that you want to buy. There's this kind of thing that happens a little, which I think is lovely, of like boyfriends buying from their girlfriends' likes, like on Depop, or like friends, looking at people's saved items and then buying from them. So there's definitely this like collecting of your own style, but again, like navigating that in really interesting fluid ways and changing up your style the next month because you actually don't want to be a mod this month, you want to be something else, and that happens quite a lot. So I think moodboarding is, and like collecting and curating is a massive part of that from a buyer perspective. And I think for sellers as well, sellers evolve and they build their style. And what we see a lot of with sellers is they get lots of their inspiration from culture, like you were saying that, Lizzie, about when you're growing up. But like, I think this is so true for all young people in whatever generation they are, that culture is the inspiration. Like, what we understand is like culture is commerce for us, right? Young people see something on TikTok and then it starts to bubble up on Depop and they can buy that look. Or I don't know, like Dua Lipa wears Vivienne Westwood and all of a sudden everyone's looking for corsets. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there is a really deep link between what we see on youth culture and TikTok and what they're kind of curating externally, and then they come to Depop to then buy that or to make it and to sell it on. So yeah, we're so linked to that kind of curatorial cultural experience for Gen Z. Absolutely.
That's awesome. I'm aware we haven't got that long left, so I've got a couple more questions that are a bit more maybe quick fire that are around that. But we always like to have kind of a kind of spanner in the works of like question. My question for you today is like, what's your favorite item that you've bought on Depop?
Oh, all right. I'm clearly into animal prints because I'm wearing them now, but I bought a leopard print jumpsuit. Full jumpsuit. And I still love this. I wore it to my first interview at Depop with red lipstick and some banging leopard print trainers. So yeah, that's got a special place in my heart on Depop. But yeah, I buy a lot of clothes on Depop. I don't think I've actually bought anything not on Depop apart from maybe trainers for the last year. So yeah, I've got many random things. But yeah, this leopard print jumpsuit is my fave.
Excellent.
And I guess the final question, without getting you into trouble, is what's next for Depop? Where do you see? I mean, you're kind of nearly a year into your tenure. I'm assuming you're probably going to be there for a while longer. Kind of where do you see the brand going? And you know, is there anything you can talk about that's kind of, you know, excitingly on the horizon?
Yeah, I guess sort of strategically our plan, so how do we take this like wonderful thing that's kind of been built a bit organically and just share it with loads and loads of people, and like this kind of circularity for everyone? Like, how do we open up the circular fashion kind of concept to like millions and millions of people? You make it really cool. Like, you find the coolest young talents you know, buy and sell on Depop, so people feel like this is just this wonderful place that they can't get that kind of fashion anywhere else. So yeah, it's a bit of a sort of boring answer, but I just go big, because we think that's what the world needs. Like, honestly, we think we need millions more people to be buying and selling secondhand, to be moving away from buying new, to be thinking about upcycling and reworking, and to be really expressing themselves creatively, and to be nice to each other on our platform. Like, yeah, I think we have this massive part of like our brand, which is about connecting people and making them feel like they're a part of something, and our kind of discussion about spaces, and, you know, making people feel like they're welcome and they belong, and we're there to support them. Like, I just want lots more people to feel that, and yeah, to try secondhand and realize that it's just as good as buying new, and in fact it's better in some ways, because you don't have the guilt, and it's like this, you're like hunting for this wonderful item. And I guess that's my ambition, is that just we get that in front of so many more people, so we genuinely change the world and we create a better future for everyone, because we're not putting loads of stuff in landfill, and we have, you know, a bigger kind of cohort of the Black community on our platform, because, you know, they buy into that equity and they get the equity within fashion that other people haven't got. You know, we work with the queer community because, you know, they feel like they have access to this future of fashion as well. Like, that's a massive part of our brand as well, and that everyone feels like they have access to like the creativity of fashion. It's not just for like a creative director or a magazine editor to tell you. Actually, if you're a young person that never felt included elsewhere, you can come to Depop and you can belong, and you can like make some money, and you can do really well, and you be a designer if you want in the future, and that's for everyone. So I guess like, yeah, that's important to me.
I think you know, the purpose and values that Depop, not only, you know, you have to be in it to understand it fully, but I think hearing from you and seeing what you know, your stuff online and things like that, the purpose and values are intrinsic to the success of it, aren't they? They're not going to be. It is going to tap into those things that everyone wants. Everyone wants a more sustainable world. People want to see, greater diversity, greater equity, greater equality. I think that this is actually how many companies are going to have to go as well, because we don't live in a world that's so binary anymore. We don't have those binary approaches, and also the expectations of this massive cohort, this massive generation. The sheer numbers of Gen Z coming through are going to demand that change. And I think what is so exciting is that you're doing it, Depop's doing it, is a trailblazer in this area, and actually many big companies and small can learn from what you're doing. And I think that, as I say, the purpose and values are probably the thing that bring most people into it.
Yeah, I'd hope so. That's why I'm there.
Okay, thank you very much, Katy. Where can people find you? Where can people find Depop and find you?
So Depop on every one of your favourite social apps. We've got a big Instagram following, on TikTok. But again, there's lots of people just talking about Depop on their own platforms as well. So just maybe have a look. Find me on Twitter, not much of an updater on Twitter. LinkedIn, @Woodrow Hill is always my handle. So come find me, say hello.
Thank you. Brandon, where can people find you?
As always, brandonralph.com or just @brandonralph everywhere. And Lizzie, where can people find you?
You can find me at lizziehodgson.com, or I've got a slightly awkward Twitter handle, LHDGSN. I don't know why. I just cut out, It
was one of those, she thinks she's really cool.
Yeah, LHDGSN. Thank you so much, Katy. We've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you, Brandon. And we will catch you next time on the next Spectrum.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. A Studio B production.